Okay, good afternoon. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. I'm very pleased today to have with me as my guest Franco Muzzio, who's a partner at Keker Van Nest. Franco, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, Franco, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your teaching experience in Harlem. Before we actually get to that, tell me a little bit about why you studied education. It looks like you wanted to be a teacher. I assume you come from family teachers. Tell me a little bit about that background.
Yeah, sure. So I don't come from a family of teachers.
Oh.
I come from an immigrant family. I myself was born in Argentina, and my parents and I immigrated to the United States in the 1980s. They had grown up during the military dictatorship era there, and my dad got an opportunity to study engineering in the States in the
Oh.
mid 80s. And so my parents wanted to move somewhere where hopefully they could raise their family with a bit more stability. So we came over. My parents really didn't know anything about the United States. They didn't have a network here. They didn't have a lot of support here, and my mom barely spoke any English when
Oh.
we immigrated. So I grew up speaking Spanish at home, and kind of navigating this world with my parents, and we didn't really know a lot, and that manifested itself in many ways, but one of the ways that was formative for me was through my experience with education. Because I spoke Spanish at home, I kind of got tracked and pushed into a math and science uh, direction from an early age in my life. And I never felt like I would have a career in reading, anything that involved reading or writing or certainly English. Like it just felt like those things weren't for me. The way that my family had kind of found its path was through my dad's engineering career. And then the standardized tests seemed to say that I should do the same thing. And I would just go into public schools where I felt like my English might have been a little bit behind some other students, and my teachers were kind of like focusing on like how I was spelling words or my grammar instead of maybe the ideas I had. And so I felt like growing up, I never had a mentor or anyone that like encouraged me to explore anything that had anything to do with reading, writing, public speaking, anything like that. And I went to college to be an engineer. And so I went to the University of Michigan and I enrolled in their engineering program. And my first year, I just really struggled.
Hmm.
I always loved math and science, and I really, more than anything, loved the logic of math, and it came very naturally to me. But at Michigan, everyone is really smart, just as smart as me, if not smarter, and had like a natural talent for the work. And I didn't have the same natural energy that some people have when they're doing something that they're just passionate about or they
Hmm.
love. And
Hmm.
so I started to think about what I might want to do.
Hmm.
And I just, my third semester in college took a writing class because I was interested in it, even though I didn't think I would be very good at it. But I was at this kind of inflection point in my life where I was like, what am I going to do? Engineering doesn't seem like it might be for me. I'll just give this class a shot, and I loved it. I
Hmm.
had this great writing professor. The first assignment was to kind of write a short story about your own life, and I wrote something about my struggles assimilating as an immigrant. And she loved the essay. She said she was the first person that ever told me I had talent for something,
Hmm.
at least with respect to reading and writing. And it kind of took off from there. She encouraged me to read certain books. She told me to take classes with these English professors. She kind of nudged. She said that if you like doing this, you should just go for it. And I think I was a bit behind some of the other folks that were majoring in English when I started out, but I just it like clicked in my head my sophomore year of college that this was something that I really enjoyed, and I didn't
Hmm.
mind like working super hard to catch up. And so over the course of college, I just ended up majoring in English, and loved it so much, loved reading books and writing and really developing my writing skills, that when I was graduating, the only thing I wanted to do was to go into a Latino neighborhood and be able to teach other students that might have been having a similar situation that I was growing up, feeling like English might not be for them, and kind of open that door for them if they wanted it open, and even if they didn't, to try to just make it more approachable for anyone
Hmm.
that wanted. And so that is what led me into teaching right after undergrad. It was my own experiences as an immigrant, and wanting to try to help other people that might be going through something similar.
Wow, that's a great story. I mean, I love how it started. I love how you were, inspired by a teacher, which is, anyways. Well, tell me, I mean, it's just so interesting. I mean, when I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, I saw, you taught in East Harlem, and I went to Columbia, so I certainly know the neighborhood. What was that like? And tell me about that experience, because you did it for a while, so it's not like you just dabbled in it and said, "Oh, forget it." I mean, you obviously did it for a while, so you must have had a lot of positives and negatives.
Yeah, I really overall I loved it. I was there for 4 years. In a funny way, it was almost like I was repeating high school because I started out teaching freshmen and sophomores, and I got to see that freshman class all the way through until they graduated as seniors. And by the time I was about to leave the school, I was teaching juniors and seniors. And so I got to
Mm.
repeat with some of the kids and see them grow. It was just an amazing job. It was very challenging. I did a program like Teach for America, which was the New York City Teaching Fellows, which is uh, these are schools that are underfunded and are in dire need for teachers, and so they will give alternative certification to people to just come in to the school and teach, and then you're learning how to be an educator while taking night classes at the same time.
Mm.
And so I didn't have a lot of training in education, and what I could do to make up for that was to just work as hard as I possibly could. And I would spend really late nights trying to figure out how to make the most engaging lessons for the students, because I think that that was the biggest challenge was finding a way to make these books interesting for the
Mm.
students.
Mm.
Once you could do that, once you could grab their attention, all the kind of classroom management issues that a lot of young teachers have, I think, go away. Because
Mm.
if everybody's engaged and interested in what you're doing, they're not going to be like standing up in the middle of your class and distracting other classmates. It's less likely that you'll have a fight break out in your classroom or something like that, because everyone is just eager to know what's coming in the lesson, to know more about the story, or to know more about whatever skill you're trying to teach them. And so it was really like a great job, and it was hard for me to leave it when I did.
How did you engage the students? Like, what kind of techniques, or how did you do that?
I think that the key to any good presentation is to get, well, at least from my philosophy was, you start out with something short that you are presenting that kind of grabs the listener's attention and gives direction to what that lesson will be in a day.
Mm.
But then you have to give the participants themselves an opportunity to do it or to engage themselves. So either that could be by small group work, or it could be an interactive lesson where you're asking for your students in the classroom or your audience members to actively participate as a collective group. But what I found never really worked for me as a student, and what I tried to avoid as a teacher, was to just talk at people for an extended amount of time without giving them an opportunity to engage. And then I think you also naturally, the other part of this is you learn how to present and project in a way that is engaging for someone else, through eye contact, through the way that you speak, through the way that you move. I tried to not stand still in the classroom ever, and
Mm.
move throughout the class to make sure that the students kind of felt my presence, because that made them feel at least like I was really engaged with them, and try to make sure that they were all engaged with me.
Now, did you enjoy teaching the freshman, sophomore more, or you enjoyed teaching the junior, senior? Sounded like you got a chance to teach the full range. What did you like most?
Yeah, I liked them all. I want to say that I think freshman is a really special age, because it's really new for the students. It's a lot of kids go to high school thinking, okay, like this is what really matters. I need to really do well. And then after a couple of months, bad habits start to reappear, and there's less of a concern, and school kind of in the middle of the year becomes this more familiar thing, and so. Uh, Trying to push the students through through those growing pains, I always found freshman year, because if you could, really rewarding. If you could establish good habits in the beginning of freshman year, it would really set the students up for success. But then, senior year is also very special, because it's your last chance to leave the students with something. And I think that they also appreciate that. They're also worried about going on to their next step, whether it's college or some other type of work or something else that they're going to be doing. It's the end of their adolescence, and it's something that I think the students themselves recognize. And so you have, in a similar way, this opportunity to give them some skills and building blocks. So I can't say that there was one that I liked more than the other, but I really did appreciate the opportunity to teach at different levels with some of the same students because you got to see how they grew.
Any inspiring stories with any particular students that you kind of inspired or really connected with?
I I I don't know that I have any in particular that immediately come to me. I can say that I've kept in touch with a lot of my students,
Oh,
which
interesting.
meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
One of my students ended up going to USC for undergrad, and then I went to UCLA for law school. And so we were able to maintain a connection that way by both being New York City transplants in Los Angeles. And then there's plenty of other students that went on to just really do great things. Some of them went to really great schools and have now they've started. I see them on LinkedIn and they work for great companies and have great careers. And it was a tough school when I started. The graduation rate I think was below 50% when I started there,
Oh.
but through the leadership at the school, by the time I was done after those 4 years, it had increased to, I'm going to put a number out there, but it was ballpark 80%. So we saw tremendous growth in the school the 4 years I was there. And I think a lot of it was due to that freshman class that I got to start with, kind of changing the culture
Interesting.
of the school and seeing how they develop.
Did you choose that school, or when you entered the program, you were just assigned to that school?
Yeah, so I got to interview with schools through the program I did, and so I applied to a bunch of schools in Spanish Harlem, and they were my first interview,
I see.
and it just the interview went really well.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I did a lesson plan, and they offered me. It was kind of like a clerkship interview where they offered me the job on the spot, but told me they had other people coming in, and so if I wanted it, I'd better accept. And it was my first job offer, and that kind of took me aback. And I was like, oh, I don't know. But I thought about it some more, and I realized this is everything I want in a school. So I should just go for it. And I did. And I'm really happy I did.
Now, usually teaching is a skill where, people say that, either you kind of have it or you don't. Do you think you kind of got that natural teaching ability? I mean, some people just have that, some people don't. And what do you think about yourself? What would you say?
I haven't heard that before. I do think that I was a good teacher. I think that it was because I had a natural passion for it. But
Yeah.
I also, while I was teaching, I saw some folks that came in and struggled their first year as teachers, but then dramatically improved their second year. And it's and I also saw a lot of teachers with very different styles be
Mm,
effective in very different ways. It's the
mm.
same as lawyering, I think. I see that at my firm now. There's a lot of different ways to litigate a case that can be done very effectively that cater to the talents that an individual has. And so I do think I was a good teacher. I like to think that. I hope my former students would agree. And I think a lot of it was due to the work I put in more than anything that I just had in me.
Well, obviously, at some point it came to an end. You went to law school. Tell me what made you decide to do that, even though it sounded like you were enjoying it. What made you make that decision?
Yeah, I did enjoy it. It was a hard decision because more than anything, I loved the students and oftentimes through programs like Teach for America or other programs, like even the Teaching Fellows program that I did, some teachers will leave after a couple of years, and I think that that can be hard for the students. And so I felt that I had to really think about whether I wanted to take another step. But part of what I was doing when I was teaching was I was always encouraging my students to push themselves, to make sure
Mhm.
that they like did everything as best they could to try out college if they thought that they might want to do that. And I had an itch personally to keep challenging myself. I think
Mhm.
I had had a lot of success in my 4 years as teaching, and I had gotten to a point where I was in my mid 20s and I wanted to try to see what else I could do. And I had always cared a lot about social justice, and I had kind of developed this love for reading and writing in college that I then carried over as a high school English teacher. And then as a teacher, I really enjoyed being on my feet and
Mm.
presenting orally. And so I just kind of thought that law school would be a natural fit and a good next step. And if it didn't work for me, I thought I could go back to teaching because I already had this career that I knew I loved. But I thought it was a good time in my life to try something else, and I went for it, and I'm really happy I did because I found that the law has been a really good fit for me, for my personality. It's been very good to me as a career, and I've enjoyed it a lot. And there's a lot of things I don't have the same day-to-day interactions with people that are depending on me in the same way my students were, where I get to talk to them every single day and present a lesson and be in front of them and kind of try to motivate them. But a lot of the skills carry over, the public speaking, the presentation. I'm a litigator, and so that stuff carried over immediately to moot court in law school. And then now when I go into court, if I get to do a jury trial, to be able to try to hold the attention of the jurors through the way that I'm communicating without going on too long and without saying more than I need to is something that I felt carried over. And then what I also got from the law, which I had been missing, was I get to write now a lot more than I was as a teacher. I get
Yeah.
to write briefs and think about things really deeply and critically. And I had discovered that I loved doing that in college, and I had started to miss it a bit because I was teaching people how to write, but I wasn't getting to do as much writing myself. So yeah, it came time to make a transition, and I'm happy that I did, though I still do miss some aspects of teaching.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I'm going to also guess that you must have really enjoyed law school too, because it got to use all the things you really enjoy, the reading and the writing. And I mean, you probably really enjoy. I'm guessing law school was a very enjoyable experience for you.
It was, to my surprise, it was. I started in 2012, so it was around the time that the graduating classes, I think, were really feeling the effects of the 2008 crash, and New York Times was putting out articles pretty regularly about how law school might not be worth the investment. And so I had some anxiety about it, and I don't know that everyone that went to law school at the time I was going into it was like, oh, this is the best thing ever. But I immediately started to love my classes. My first few classes were contracts and torts and civil procedure, and I just loved the inherent like logic that went into how judges reason a case and come down to a holding. And the edge cases were always so interesting to me, where you have a decision, a precedent that says it should go one way and a precedent that says it should go the other way, and they're really close. And how do you decide this? And maybe it's policy, and maybe it's the specific facts of that case that influence the judge's decision. But to get to see the way that decisions are reasoned over and over again, and try to kind of develop an understanding myself for how judges think and how case law develops, it came naturally to me, and I found it so interesting. But again, it was similar to the experience I had when I was in undergrad, where I transitioned out of engineering into studying English, and I all of a sudden had this natural energy for it. I had the same experience in law school, maybe even more, where it was just this great experience for me. And then the other part of it too is, I think any lawyer will say that the friends that you make your first year in law school, they really stick with you through life. And I had immediately from my first semester at UCLA just this great community of friends that I bonded with right away, and it was just so exciting to be in that environment.
Well, in a way, law school is kind of like the perfect culmination of kind of everything you've done because it has the writing and the reading, but it's also got a lot of the logic skills that you probably picked up as an engineer also from your training and your interest in math and science. So, it really just kind of melds all that together. I mean, it's really probably the perfect discipline for what, your experience and your interests.
It's funny. It feels like it found me more than I found it. I definitely wasn't thinking about being a lawyer at any point when I was an undergrad,
Mm-hmm.
and certainly before that, I never thought I had the skills to do something like this, or that something like this would be open to me. And I didn't, grow up around lawyers or know any lawyers. And yeah, I agree. It feels like it is something that offers me a combination of a lot of my different interests and passions, and I enjoy my work very much.
Totally. Well, you're obviously very early in your career, but do you ever see someday that you'll ever teach law? I mean, that's the other thing. You can obviously teach law at some point in your career, or have you thought about maybe doing that on the side? Is that something that you entertain?
Yeah, I haven't thought about it seriously in any way. I really like my job at Keker Van Nest Peters now. We're a trial boutique firm. We do really high stakes litigation, and I find it really exciting. I enjoy being in the courtroom, whether it's arguing in front of a judge or being in trial, and I'm having a lot of fun with what I'm doing right now. We get all different kinds of really challenging cases, and I say this to candidates that interview with our firm pretty regularly. they ask me why you stay, and one of the reasons is that every case that we get is different, and I feel like I'm constantly pushing myself and growing and learning a new area of the law, learning a new type of approach to a case with attorneys here that are immensely talented, and I feel like I'm still growing so much as an attorney that I haven't gotten to a point where I felt like I need to make a shift and try out a new sort of challenge. This work I still find it very rewarding and exciting.
Yeah. Well, Franco, I really appreciate your taking the time and sharing your story. I really loved how it kind of came together and the story about how it found you and whatever the case. It was a wonderful story, and thank you for sharing it with me.
Thank you so much. It was nice.
This is Richard Hsu and Franco Muzzio. Thanks.